Man, what a beautiful song. Well, I am so glad that you are here this morning. And, as we jump in, just to make sure that in this time of celebration that you're watching the right Christmas movies, I'm gonna do a little test, okay? I'm gonna give you a quote, and you gotta tell me what Christmas story it's from. God bless us, everyone. Christmas Carol, yeah, Scrooge. I'll let Scrooge go, that's good, okay? How about this one? Every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. Oh, It's a Wonderful Life. Most of you that said that were over 50. Anyway, how about this one? The best way to spread Christmas cheer is singing loud for all to hear. Okay, you're good, all right. Now I'm really gonna test you guys here. Surprise, Eddie, if I woke up tomorrow with my head under the carpet, I wouldn't be more surprised. Christmas, but you're my people, I'm telling you right now. How about this? Merry Christmas, you filthy animal. Yes. Okay, well, you guys are doing pretty good so far. How about this? She will bear a son and you shall call his name Jesus. Yeah, you're on it. The Bible, for he will save his people from their sin. If you said chosen, that does not count. It's the Bible. I'm quoting this. And then later in Matthew 1, verse 23, behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. Over the last few weeks, for those of you that have been here, we've been in the middle of what I call the most boring Christmas series of all time. We've been going through the genealogy of Matthew chapter 1, but here's what we found. There's not an accidental name in this genealogy. Every name is purposeful and tells us a little bit about why Jesus showed up. In fact, there are 4 things that really stand out to me from what we have here in Matthew chapter 1, because the genealogy is leading up to the angel showing up to Joseph and giving him the name Jesus, saying, yeah, that little teenage girl that you're engaged to, she's pregnant. Trust me, nothing bad there. It's from God. It had to be a big deal. He should call his name Jesus. He'll save his people from the sins. And this is to fulfill the prophecy, and it goes all the way back to Isaiah 7:14. He should call his name Emmanuel, God with us. There's a few things we can learn. First of all, one of the things that I think we learn from Matthew chapter 1 is that waiting on God is part of every Christian story. I'm just gonna tell you right now, if you think Christianity means that immediately, if I'm following Jesus Christ, everything gets perfect overnight, and that it's just gonna stay, blue skies and sunshine and birds sing. No, it just doesn't happen that way. In fact, Matthew 1, the genealogy begins in verse 1. It's the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. It starts with Abraham, this guy who, if you go all the way back to Genesis, was called out of his tent by God, and God said, I want you to look at the stars of the sky, Abraham, because the generations that come from you, it's gonna be as many as those stars in the sky. But here's the thing, he gets this promise, and it doesn't happen overnight. In fact, 2,000 years go by before this little teenage girl, Mary, has an angel appear to her and is told by the angel that she's going to bear the Messiah. And after she's told this, I'm sure that she's confused. She's trying to wrap her mind around this. But in Luke chapter 1, she goes to visit her cousin. She sings this beautiful song, and in that song is the fulfillment of the prophecy that God gave Abraham, because she got it when she said, he, speaking of God, remembered his promise to our father Abraham. But here's the deal. Between the promise given and the promise being fulfilled was 2,000 or so years of waiting. How many of you, if you're gonna be honest, would say, in some way, maybe it's a circumstance, maybe it's a family situation, whatever, how many of you would say that you're in a waiting season? Can I just see your hands? Maybe we're waiting to hear from a job, waiting to hear about, okay, we're in a waiting season. A lot of us are in a waiting season. Here's the encouragement for those of us who are in a waiting season. We serve a God whose timing is not ours, but we serve a God who is faithful. In fact, Isaiah said this in Isaiah 64:4. He said, from of old no one has heard or perceived by the ear, no eye has seen a God beside you who acts for those who wait for him. I'm gonna tell you, waiting is part of every Christian's story. But if there's anything that we get from Matthew chapter 1, it's this: part of your story is going to unfold in the dark. God's gonna write part of that story and you have no idea that his pen is moving. In fact, like in the middle of Matthew chapter 1, we read names like this. Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel, and Shealtiel the father of Zerubbabel, and Zerubbabel the father of Abihud, and Abihud the father of Eliakim. And we're like, dude, I don't even know these guys. Who are these guys? What are their stories? Most of them, we don't know their stories. But they have one. But what I know is every name that I read was either part of the captivity when these people who had the title God's people were sent into Babylon for captivity. They were either there or they had to come back to a homeland that was decimated. And they're like, God, where are you? God, what are you doing? Here's the crazy thing: when God broke into real history, most people missed it. We didn't understand what God was doing in the dark. When you read the Bible's history, we think that Israel and Judah are a pretty big deal because those are God's people. That's what it's about. But you got to know this: nobody outside of the Jews cared anything about the kingly line of Jesus. You're like, well, they had kings. Well, come on. I mean, how many of you can name the last 5 kings of Liechtenstein? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah, okay. No, they would have been considered this little, small, backwater country under the rule of Rome. But here's what I love. God had made a promise to Abraham to bring salvation through the world. And it was going to be somebody came through his family tree that did it. And he literally brought even Rome, as we heard in the beautiful reading of Luke chapter 2. What he did was he used Rome to cause Joseph and Mary to go to Bethlehem to be part of the taxation there. The guys in Rome had no idea that there was a prophecy that the Savior was going to be born in Bethlehem, but God used mighty Rome to move 2 individuals 90 miles so the prophecy would be fulfilled, because that's just how God does it. And I would say this, that every person here this morning that is stressed out by what you see or worried about what you can't see needs to hear this truth. There's always an unseen story behind the reported story. God's network in heaven is not showing what you're watching on Fox News or CNN. Here's the reality. God is guiding history, all of this according to his plan. He's writing the next chapter, but you've got to understand this, that the chapter he's writing for some of you right now is a chapter you can't see because you're in the dark, but God isn't. But I can tell you this, if you're not dead, God's not done. It's not just that waiting is part of the story. It's not just that part of the story is going to unfold in the dark. I will tell you this, the theme of the story that's being written is one of grace. In fact, you go through Matthew chapter 1, we've been doing this. Like last week, we looked at this lady by the name of Tamar, which is crazy because most genealogies back there in patriarchal times, like women's names don't show up. Interestingly enough, there are 5 women whose names are mentioned, and every single one of them has a crazy story. There's Tamar, and we talked about her. I'm not gonna get into that. She dressed up like a prostitute to get pregnant by her father-in-law, and you're like, whoa, what? Go back to last week. I'm just telling you, it's messed up. You didn't leave it out of the story. And when you think that back then, a genealogy, who you listen to your genealogy was kind of like a resume. Like King Herod back in the day, it's the guy that was on the throne when Jesus was born was reported to have deleted all of his embarrassing ancestors so it looked like he came from a line of sheer perfection. You know what I'm saying? Because there can be some embarrassing things. Like for instance, in my family, I don't even know how to say this, my dad's sister married my mom's nephew. Sounds like a very Kentucky thing to do. I'm just telling you, like, you'd leave that out. Don't talk to you about that. But he left Tamar in there. He left Rahab the prostitute in there. There's another lady that's just mentioned this way, the wife of Uriah in there. You know who that was? That was Bathsheba. David took advantage of her while she was married to another guy. She gets pregnant, and the guy that is her husband is actually one of David's best warriors. David intentionally has this guy killed to cover his tracks. She shows up there. Ruth, the Moabitess, she shows up. You're like, what's the big deal about that? Well, Moabites weren't, because of past sins, they weren't even allowed to worship in the temple. And yet, there's Ruth. In fact, it even ends up with Mary, the mother of Jesus. I mean, he was born under a cloud. I mean, seriously, if your teenage daughter came to you and said she's pregnant, she's like, it was God, you're like, yeah, I don't think so. Think about it. In fact, the Pharisees threw this in Jesus' face, John 8:41, when they said to him, we were not born of sexual immorality. In other words, yeah, we want to hear from you. We know where you come from. We know your people. Here's the reason I think this is such a big deal. Matthew doesn't include and doesn't focus on who you think he would when introducing Jesus as the Messiah. It's a list of moral outsiders, a group of ethnic outsiders, a group of gender outsiders. Here's the point. Listen, this is the point. Grace is the theme of the story. Jesus came for outsiders. This is why we call the gospel the good news. And I don't know where you're at today, where you came from, your excuses for why this could not be for you. Matthew's genealogy says this: I don't care where you are, what you've done, what you've come from, you can still be part of my family. Man, what a beautiful thing. What I love is we're not saved because we're perfect, because we're so righteous. We are saved by grace through faith. He came to us in our shame. He saves us from our sin. He saves us from our shame. That is the story of grace, which at the end of this, when you read through Matthew chapter 1, what you cannot miss is this: Jesus is the hero, and Jesus will be the hero of every story. Every story. Jesus is the hero. The center of history is what God is doing through Jesus Christ. What you got to know this is that Jesus' face is on the front of the Bible. Jesus' face is on the back of the Bible, if I can use that in a figurative sense. The entire word is about him. And as we read this genealogy, I mean, there's these essential things that we have to understand. Jesus came, he was given as a gift. My question is to you is this: have you received the gift? Because I can tell you why. There can be a gift under the tree. You can see the gift. You can shake the gift. You can examine the gift. But until you receive the gift, it's just another gift that's left under the tree. Listen, Jesus Christ is the gift of Christmas. Have you received the gift? He's the center point of all history. My question is, do you know the hero of your story? This is what it's all about. Jesus is the hero of every story. And when it's all said and done, when all the minor characters exit the stage, it's going to be Jesus front and center, receiving all of the glory. We read that if it doesn't happen today, there is coming a day when every knee shall bow, every tongue on heaven, on earth, and below the earth is going to acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord of all. My question is this: have you knelt before the King of Kings? Have you understood the significance of this gift? Several years ago, Cassidy would have been about 4, my daughter. Trey probably was 7. This was when I believe one of the greatest Christmas gifts of all time came out. It was put out by Nintendo. Nintendo Wii is still the greatest console of all time. I mean, can you get better? Is it any better than bowling? I'm gonna tell you right now, that is where it's at. But I remember, man, this was the hottest gift, and I had taken Cassidy, she was 4 years old, with me to Best Buy, and we were gonna get this for Trey for Christmas. And this was an unusually expensive gift. We'd never done something this expensive for our kids. And so on our way home from Best Buy, I told Cassidy, which you're gonna judge me that I'm a terrible parent, and I get it, and whatever. I said, I don't want you telling Trey about this. You cannot tell Trey about this. In fact, if you tell him about this, I'm probably gonna have to take it back. I know, terrible, fear-based, whatever. And she kept the secret for about 2 days. And one day I was downstairs and Trey and Cassidy, they didn't know I was down there. They were sitting about halfway up on our stairs. They were behind this rail, the little wall there where they couldn't be seen. And I hear my daughter, who I said, don't tell Trey about this present. She's like, Trey, I know what Dad got you for Christmas. And Trey's like, what? She's like, I can't tell. And he's like, well, then you don't know what I got for Christmas. He goes, yes, I do. Well, if you know, you can tell me. No, I'm not gonna tell. And they go back and forth. And finally she goes, he got you a Nintendo Wii. And I walked around the corner and she goes, and she starts crying. And she looks over at Trey and she goes, now Dad's gonna have to take it back and you're not getting a Nintendo Wii for Christmas. Trey told me last night, he said, I didn't know if I was more mad at her or more mad at you. I was mad at both of you. Well, here's the deal. We ended up giving him the gift and it was great, but I thought about Cassidy. This morning on my way over here, we were talking about that story last night. I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna throw this in. She was so excited to tell her brother about the gift that was coming to him. And I thought, man, as I was driving over here, man, I was feeling that same excitement on my way over here. So excited to tell you about the gift. Trees, lights, I love all this. Like I said, I love Christmas. But man, I wanted to tell you about the fact that Jesus came for you. You can receive this gift. And as many as receive this gift, man, they got this brand new name. You're now called a son, a daughter of God. We began this service by reading John chapter 1. I want to close this service by reading John chapter 1, verse 4. In him was life. And the light, this life was the light of men. The light shines in darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. You see, the genealogy pointed to the fact that a baby was going to be born, that his name was going to be called Jesus, because he was going to save his people from their sins, that newborn baby. Jesus, he saves his people. Listen, the light has come. He's called Emmanuel. I don't know what you're going through, but his name Emmanuel just means something to you that are walking through darkness. It means that God is with you. You're not alone. The light has come. Jesus, the Christ, is Lord of all. The light has come. And this morning, what we're going to do to close this service, as I light this candle for the Advent, the Christ candle, I'm gonna see if I can take this off and do this without breaking anything. My ushers are gonna meet me here in the middle, and we're gonna actually go from row to row, from person to person, and we're gonna illustrate together the power of the light coming to darkness. Man, in him was life. This life was the light of men. And today, let's celebrate the fact that the light has come.